and welcome to today's episode of the Exposure Scientist podcast. If you're watching on video, I'm doing things a little differently today. I decided it's a nice day outside. Before it gets too hot, I'd like to take the recording outside, so here I am. And interestingly, one thing I'd like to discuss today is a topic that I've seen come up often lately, more and more, is what is industrial hygiene? Lots of people have different definitions or identifying what it does or who can be involved or what expertise that we have. I've heard lots of different things. I've heard, industrial hygiene is almost the liberal arts degree of the scientific field. We know a lot of different things about a lot of different subjects. And I think that's important for people to understand is that industrial hygiene has foundation for a long time. Our roots go back far, and I'm sure we all learned that in school for the industrial hygienists that are listening. There has been a lot of change in the industrial hygiene field over the past number of years. There's been through the American Industrial Hygiene Association, there's been a want to rebrand to the occupational OEHS professional, occupational environmental health and safety professional. That's a big mouthful. There's a lot of people that view the industrial hygiene as there's some scope creep, branding that into the environmental. A lot of people start viewing that as well. You can do the environmental stuff. You can work on environmental permits. You can do environmental protection. You can do all this kind of stuff. And we dabble in that. I think we have our hands in that ability, but I think adding that to a job title of industrial hygienist can sometimes be a little too far afield. I've had other people make comments to me and say, the way the profession is going, they're taking the industrial out of the industrial hygiene. They're taking industry out of the industrial hygiene, saying, what are we doing? Where are we going? What are our roots supposed to, where are our roots and where are they supposed to be leading us to? I had one podcast where I talked about OSHA and OSHA's lack of enforcement and saying, OSHA doesn't have teeth. No one right now fears OSHA with cuts that are maybe going on. Who knows? I got an email from AIHA saying, well, they're looking at, defunding or cutting funding to NIOSH. Where is industrial hygiene going? Where are our expertise? I had someone call me the other day saying, well, we're looking for someone to help us out with a scenario. We need a microbiologist. I was like, well, what do you need a microbiologist for? Well, we need someone to discuss how Legionella forms and systems and discuss where Legionella risk assessment points are. I was like, well, that's what industrial hygienists do. Industrial hygienists can do that. We have our, we look up at the CIH rubrics of our knowledge areas of, of biological organisms or biological agents. A lot of people just don't know what we do. I think the problem is we've had a lot of branding problems. We do safety, we do, exposure assessments, we do all kinds of, we have the ability to even, I don't want to say there's scope creep with a certified safety professional, but, if we need to, we can do lockout, tag out stuff. We do all kinds of stuff. And I think that's maybe part of the problem is sometimes we're almost a little too diversified in what we do. I like to focus my practice area on exposure science. What are people being exposed to? How is it potentially harming them? And what do we do to mitigate those exposures so they don't happen anymore? And that solves a lot of the problems from what industrial hygienists do. That's what we've always done. We've looked at what's harming people. We've looked at them making them sick, whether it's exposures to, the chemicals or particulates or anything, how it's making them sick, what is the exposure level, and how do we stop it? How do we implement our hierarchy of controls? And I think a lot of people just don't understand or appreciate that. I think it comes with a lot of scope creep, what's going on of who we're trying to please, and a lot of people not recognizing the importance of industrial hygiene. I forgot, I think it was IAQ radio or one of the discussion points and one of the other shows that are available out there for your viewing pleasure. And I'm in Florida. a lot of the stuff that went on in Florida, we used to have a large citrus industry. We still have a large citrus industry. It's not as big as it used to be, and I'll say it's shrinking somewhat. And I think it's important to somewhat understand that there used to be a lot of industrial hygiene involved in it, and there isn't any. One of the comments I made on there was, hey, you know what? Industrial hygienists are more than just the security people on site, because a lot of the safety stuff, a lot of that safety parameter that we have our expertise in some regard, was given to the safety people. Nobody needs industrial hygienists there. Florida is not a huge industrial hygiene area. A lot of people down here don't know what we do because there's not a lot of industry. But it's important to understand that as the field and the needs grow and change, so do our perspective on it. And that is very vital to continuing the profession of industrial hygiene. We can rebrand ourselves as OEHS professionals. We can, like myself, we call ourselves exposure scientists. If you look at National Institutes of Health, I think they actually have a web page that's dedicated to exposure science, exposure scientists. You can go look it up. I think it's important for us to understand that. A lot of the problems are solved with exposure science. A lot of the analysis that can be done is through our abilities through exposure science. And the continued dilution or lack of understanding, lack of clear definition of that is a challenge for the layman. There was, years ago, everybody remembers we started saying, I am IH. We did that for a while. Now it's, I am OEHS professional. And there's just so many mixed messages on who we are and what we do, and there's just not many of us. In the grand scheme of things, there aren't many of us. So I think we need to focus on our message, our brand, maybe identify. You may hear the birds in the background. I hope you do. They're a nice ambient sound. We need to focus on what we're good at. And I don't say what we're good at. We can do the other stuff, but helping people understand what we're good at, getting our message across. We can all go our conferences and go, national conference or local chapters, whatever, and we can all talk to each other. But I say this time and time again, we're in an echo chamber. We're all telling each other the same things that we already know. Go out, talk to other groups, let them know who we are. Talk in areas that people are going, what is an industrial hygienist? If you have to explain it, go explain it. I recently went to a conference. It was called The Experience. I was invited there by Kayla McGowan. She is with R&R, is remediation and restoration. She asked me to come and say, tell us about industrial hygiene. Tell us what you do so we know, so our members know and grow. I wrote an article for them as well. Get out there beyond our field and tell people what we do. Help them understand what we do. Because if I have people calling me up, I actually have a client now who says, can you remind me what you do? Well, I know they know what they need me to do, and I'm telling them that, yes, I can do that. It's within our wheelhouse. They're like, well, how do I describe you? Well, that's a good question, because there's 10 different descriptions of us out there right now. I don't go to a physician and go, are you a homeopathic physician? Are you a regular physician? Are you physician light? Are you medical practitioner? It's there needs to be some focus in our field, and that lack of focus from messaging and branding is making it super difficult for people that are not in the know to know things. And I'm just going to give this as a ridiculous example. I was talking to a group of professionals. I mean, professionals. They've had graduate education, in, I'll say, liberal art areas. And one of the questions, I was describing something, and I said I have a Doctor of Philosophy degree, a PhD degree, and I had someone come up to me afterwards and say, I had no idea that PhD meant Doctor of Philosophy. And I was stunned. I was like, really? But it's a newer group of people that, and I'm not saying I'm super old. I mean, I'm getting older, like all of us. But there's a group of people that are younger than the mid-career individual that does not have the experience, does not have the exposure that we do. And I don't know who's helping them out, if anyone's helping them out. I recently called a local OSHA office and I said, "Oh, can I speak to so and so?" "Oh, they've retired." "Can I speak to so and so?" "Oh, they've retired." There's a whole bunch of new people. And my fear, again, this goes back to the OSHA thing with OSHA having no teeth. They seem to be going after the easiest things because it seems like the people who had the knowledge and experience have retired. And they just they aren't seeing or looking after things that need to be done or enforcing what needs to be done or know having that knowledge area. And the same thing with I'll say the early career people who are maybe searching us out for needs is they don't know what we do. They don't know who we are. And we have to help them identify who we are. And the lack of clear branding, the lack of focus is not helping them out. So I encourage everyone, and hopefully this podcast is listen. From my take, the heart of what we do, we all got our degrees in a science-based field, a hard science. We are scientists. We do things from a scientific methodological standpoint. We need to implement and help people understand that we are scientists. If we're industrial hygienists or if we're board certified, CIHS certified industrial hygienists, help them understand that, listen, we have a lot of knowledge in a lot of particular areas. There's certain ones that we typically always focus on. No matter what you're doing, you're still worried about the science. You're still worried about what people's exposures are. You're still worried about what the risks may be, and you're still worried about how to control those risks. And I think those are three things to understand is we're looking at exposure, whether it's from a safety standpoint or a chemical standpoint or biological standpoint or a physical stressor. We're looking at the risk from that. We may be quantifying that through sampling or some kind of an analytical methodology, and we're looking at ways to control it. That's what it comes down to, is we are scientists evaluating exposures. And listen, I get it. Industrial hygienists have a long history and a long knowledge through the American Industrial Hygiene Association, ACGIH. But rebranding and having lack of focus is making it super difficult for people to find us, so people don't understand and know what we do. And I think that's important for us to at least understand and acknowledge and move forward from and figure out how we, as these exposure scientists, or whatever you want to call yourself, again, whenever I'm speaking at AIHA, I always enforce we're exposure scientists, And in fact, where I do my alma mater, USF, University of South Florida. Their degrees now, from what I understand, they have, I'll say, a focus in exposure science. There's a recognition and change from industrial hygiene at some level in some of those. Helping people understand what we do from a knowledge area. We have to understand what the exposures are. We have to understand where those exposures originate from and how those exposures form, whether it's from a microbiological standpoint, from a chemistry standpoint of mixing chemicals that may be mixed in a way that doesn't support is not in a safe manner, or the chemicals that shouldn't be mixed, or what have you. Understanding that there's exposures, what the causes are, how to quantify those exposures, and how to mitigate them. And I think that is very much lost on a lot of people. So I know that, and I know that some people that are listening are probably students right now, because I've heard from students, or I've heard that these podcasts are being played in some classrooms, some graduate level classrooms. Understand that there's a particular way to focus yourself that will help people understand what we do. Because even when people ask me what I do, or in past, or ask my wife, it's gone the gamut of, oh, he's a toxicologist. Oh, he's a physician. Well, no. Well, he's an environmental scientist. Oh, well, he does this. Well, no. He's an industrial hygienist. Oh, well, and again, I always throw up pictures of people cleaning in an industrial setting. Well, no. We need to figure out how to best brand ourselves so people know what we do. And I'm not talking about other people in our field know what we do. I'm talking about lay people to help them understand what we do. Because that's what we want to target, in my opinion. We want to target people who don't have the experience here, who may be new hires at a company or at an organization and say, man, I really need this. Who do I talk to? And I don't want them to have to go to 3 other people to figure out that they need to come to us. I want them to understand that they should come to us first, to know how to come to us first. And I am open for people to contact me and let me know your thoughts on how do we get people to realize who we are, to know who we are, and to easily disseminate that information in a very direct manner. The whole hope with these podcasts are people in the general population are listening to them. If they have a problem with an exposure or they're concerned with an exposure, I've got people asking me about microplastics. What are the microplastic exposure points that we need to consider? What are the things that we need to worry about from exposure to dusts or molds or what have you? They know to come to us. If they hear exposure, they should know industrial hygiene. And to rebrand as, I don't know, occupational, environmental, health, and safety professionals. No one knows what that means. No one that's a layman knows what that means. So I'm hoping this starts additional conversations. I always hope to do that. I'm hoping that if you have questions on what we do, reach out. I'm hoping that you understand that we need to have laser focus for what we do so we can help people understand that they can come to us for their needs. Because right now, I've got people calling me and saying, tell me what you do and can you help me? Because if they look up industrial hygiene and don't know what we do, then we're doing a bad job of helping them understand it. So my whole goal, at least today's episode, is to think about your elevator pitch speech. Think about what you do. Disseminate that information in 15, 20, 30 seconds. Get it straight to the point. Don't dance around. Help me if you want to. Give me some ideas on what your ideas on how you help clients or people understand what we do. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you got something out of it. And I hope to actually hear from you. If you have some comments or questions on this, because again, this is an open conversation that I don't want it to end. I want it to continue, and we'll figure out how we can help people understand that we do from an exposure assessment, exposure science sample. Thank you.